Are your container plants struggling no matter how much effort you put in? Maybe the leaves keep yellowing, the soil always looks too wet, or the growth just stalls? Don't blame yourself, and it's definitely not bad luck. The reality is most gardeners are unknowingly making the same small errors that quietly damage their plants. In this video, I'll walk you through the 7 biggest mistakes people make with container gardening. Even better, after each one I'll show you the simple fix so your plants can bounce back stronger than ever. And be sure to stick around until the very end, because the last mistake is the one almost everyone makes without realizing it, and correcting it could completely transform your garden. Whether you're raising flowers, herbs, or vegetables in pots, container gardening comes with its own set of challenges. But once you know what to avoid, you'll be amazed at how much healthier your plants look and how much easier gardening feels. So let's break down the 7 deadliest container gardening mistakes, and more importantly, how to fix them starting today. And if you love practical gardening advice that actually helps your plants thrive, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a tip. Together, we'll grow the garden you've always wanted. One of the top reasons container plants struggle or even die has to do with something most people overlook: the size of the pot. If the container is too small, the roots quickly run out of room and become root-bound, circling endlessly and choking themselves. When that happens, the plant can't take in water or nutrients properly, no matter how much care you give. On the other hand, if the container is much too large, the soil retains more water than the plant can use. The result? Heavy, soggy soil that suffocates roots and often leads to root rot. So what's the right balance? Aim for a container that's about 2 to 4 inches wider than the plant's current root ball. That gives enough space for healthy root growth without drowning them in excess soil. And don't forget the golden rule: every pot must have drainage holes at the bottom. Without those, size doesn't matter. Your plant will still be in trouble. Here's an easy way to think about it. If you're repotting something small like basil or mint, don't jump straight from a tiny starter pot to a giant 5-gallon container. Step it up gradually, maybe to an 8-inch pot first, then move up again once it fills out. The difference is visible almost instantly. Plants in the right size container look fuller, greener, and more productive, while those in the wrong pot look stunted, weak, and tired. Now I'm curious, what's your go-to container size? Do you prefer smaller pots that are easy to move, or big statement containers that stand out on your patio? Let me know in the comments. Next, let's tackle one of the sneakiest plant killers: poor drainage. Imagine this: you pick the perfect plant, pot it up in a beautiful container, water it with care, and just a few weeks later the leaves are yellowing, the stems are floppy, and the roots are brown and mushy. What went wrong? Root rot. And in most cases, the real issue is lack of drainage. Here's why. If water can't escape the pot, it collects at the bottom, suffocating the roots. Plants need water, yes, but they also need air. When soil stays waterlogged, the roots literally drown. Once rot sets in, it's almost impossible to reverse. The solution? Always check your pots for drainage holes. You'd be surprised how many decorative containers look amazing, but give water nowhere to go. If you love a pot that doesn't have holes, no problem, grab a drill and make some. Your plants will thank you for it. Another common gardening myth you've probably heard is that adding gravel or rocks at the bottom of a pot helps with drainage. The truth? It doesn't, and can actually make things worse by trapping water higher up in the soil. What your plants really need is a well-draining potting mix and those essential drainage holes. If your containers sit on a porch or patio, take it a step further by propping them up with pot feet or bricks. This prevents water from pooling underneath and keeps roots from sitting in soggy soil. The golden rule is simple: water should flow in easily and drain out just as easily. If your soil stays wet for days after watering, something's wrong. Be honest, have you ever lost a plant to root rot? If you have, drop a little pot emoji in the comments. Don't feel bad, we've all been there. The good news is, now you know how to stop it from happening again. Mistake number 3 is another big one: using garden soil in your pots instead of a proper potting mix. Garden soil works fine in the ground where earthworms, microbes, and natural drainage balance everything out. But in a container, it becomes heavy, compacts easily, and squeezes out the air pockets roots need to breathe. Without oxygen, roots suffocate and growth stalls. Even worse, garden soil drains unevenly in pots. Some areas turn into soggy swamps while others dry out completely. Your poor plant doesn't know whether it's drowning or dehydrated. That's why potting mix is a game changer. A good mix is light, fluffy, and specially blended for containers. It usually has ingredients like peat moss or cocoa ware to hold just the right amount of water, plus perlite or vermiculite to keep everything airy and draining well. Many even come with a starter dose of nutrients to help your plant settle in. Here's a quick example. Try growing tomatoes in plain garden soil, and you'll end up with stunted, weak plants struggling in rock-hard dirt. But give them a quality potting mix and they'll spread their roots, take up water and air easily, and grow into big bushy plants loaded with fruit. Want to go further? Mix your own blend. 2 parts potting soil, 1 part compost, and 1 part perlite. That way you control both drainage and nutrition. So tell me, do you usually grab pre-made potting mix, or do you like experimenting with your own DIY blends? Share your answer in the comments. Mistake number 4 is one every gardener has faced: watering. Too much or too little, both can wipe out a plant. Unlike in-ground plants, containers depend entirely on you for water, and pots dry out faster in heat, but can also trap excess moisture if drainage isn't right. Overwatering suffocates roots, turns stems mushy, and creates that sour smell of root rot. On the flip side, underwatering leaves plants wilted, crispy, and weak. Sometimes they recover with a deep drink, but if it keeps happening, the stress is too much. So how do you get it right? Use the finger test. Stick your finger about 2 inches into the soil. If it feels dry, it's time to water. If it's still damp, wait another day or two, and when you water, go deep. Keep going until water runs out the bottom of the pot. That way the whole root system gets hydrated, instead of just the surface. I learned this the hard way with basil. At first I gave it little sips every day, but the roots stayed shallow and the plants collapsed. Once I switched to deep, less frequent watering, they grew like crazy. Here's another pro tip: group your pots by water needs. Put thirsty plants like tomatoes and cucumbers together, and drought-tolerant ones like rosemary or succulents in another spot. That way you're not overwatering one while underwatering another. Now for some fun, are you guilty of overwatering or underwatering? Type O if you tend to drown your plants, or U if you forget to water until it's too late. Personally, I used to be Team O all the way. Mistake number 5 has everything to do with light, either not enough of it or sometimes way too much. The truth is, every plant has its own sunlight needs. Ignore those and your container garden will show it fast. Place a sun-loving plant in shade, and it turns pale, stretched out and weak. Put a shade-loving plant in harsh sunlight, and you'll see scorched leaves, crispy edges, and stress that's hard to undo. Now, the great thing about container gardening is that pots can be moved. The tricky part is that you're the one responsible for tracking how much light your space really gets. Most people guess wrong. They say this area gets plenty of sun, but in reality it may only be 3 hours. Here's a simple rule: full sun, 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight. Perfect for veggies, herbs like basil, and flowers such as petunias. Partial shade, 3 to 5 hours of sun. Great for spinach, lettuce, and impatiens. Full shade, less than 3 hours. Ideal for plants like ferns or hostas. One of the easiest tricks is to actually track the sun. Set reminders to check your garden throughout the day and see how long each spot gets light. You'll often be surprised, especially with trees, fences, or buildings casting shifting shadows. And remember, containers are mobile. That's their superpower. If a plant looks stressed, don't be afraid to slide the pot to a new location. Sometimes moving it just a few feet makes all the difference. For example, I once had a pot of peppers that refused to grow. They stayed tiny for weeks. Then I realized they were only getting 4 hours of sun. Once I moved them to a sunnier spot with about 7 hours of light, they shot up, flowered, and started producing within 2 weeks. So tell me, are you more of a sun gardener or a shade gardener? Drop your answer in the comments. Mistake number 6 catches a lot of gardeners by surprise: skipping fertilizer. Here's why it's a problem. In the ground, roots can spread out and pull nutrients from the surrounding soil. But in a pot, plants only have what you give them, and every time you water, some of those nutrients wash away. Over time, it's like a pantry that slowly empties. Your plant starts strong, then growth slows, leaves fade to pale yellow, and flowers or fruit become disappointing. The solution is regular feeding. The simplest way is to mix slow-release fertilizer pellets into the soil when you first plant. These break down gradually, giving your plants a steady supply of food. But for containers, I also recommend adding a liquid feed every 2 to 4 weeks during the growing season. Think of it like a quick boost of energy that keeps them thriving. You can use an all-purpose fertilizer, or choose one suited to your crop. High nitrogen for leafy greens, high phosphorus for flowers and fruit. If you prefer organic, compost tea or fish emulsion works wonders by nourishing both the plant and the soil life in your pots. Here's a real-life example. Last summer I grew 2 identical pots of petunias. One got regular fertilizer, the other didn't. Within weeks the difference was dramatic. The fed pot overflowed with bright blooms, while the unfed one looked thin and lifeless. Same water, same sun, same soil. The only difference was food. So don't fall into the trap of thinking water is enough. Plants are living things, and they need consistent nutrition to thrive. Now I'm curious, what's your go-to fertilizer? Do you stick to store-bought, go organic, or even make your own at home? Share in the comments, I'd love to hear your tips. Mistake number 7 is one I see all the time, and it usually comes from good intentions. Gardeners get so excited about their plants that they end up stuffing too many into a single container. Maybe you've picked up a tray of seedlings, don't want to waste any, and suddenly 6 of them are squished into a pot meant for 2. The problem? Overcrowding sets up a silent battle both above and below the soil. Roots compete for the same water and nutrients. On top, overlapping leaves block sunlight and reduce airflow, which invites problems like stunted growth, mildew, or fungal disease. Think of it like forcing 10 people to share a tiny one-room apartment. Sure, it might be manageable at first, but eventually space runs out, tempers flare, and illnesses spread. Plants feel the same pressure when they're crammed too tight. The solution is simple: respect spacing requirements. If the tag says 12 inches apart, that rule applies even in containers. Yes, the pot may look a little bare in the beginning, but trust me, those plants will quickly grow, fill in the gaps, and end up looking healthier than an overcrowded mess. Another pro tip is to mix plants with different growth habits. For instance, the popular thriller filler spiller method works beautifully: one tall plant, one medium height, and one trailing variety. Each gets its own role, space, and airflow, together creating a stunning, balanced display. So let me ask you honestly, have you ever been guilty of crowding your containers? I'll admit I have. Share your stories in the comments, because I promise you're not alone. Quick recap of the big mistakes. 1. Wrong container size. Too small strangles roots, too big leaves, soil soggy. 2. Poor drainage, no holes, roots suffocate. 3. Using garden soil, heavy soil compacts and chokes roots in pots. 4. Over or under watering, both stress plants and can be fatal. 5. Incorrect sunlight, too much or too little light weakens plants. 6. Skipping fertilizer, nutrients wash out faster in pots, consistent feeding is key. 7. Overcrowding, plants need breathing room to grow strong and resist disease. Avoid these 7 mistakes, and your success rate in container gardening will soar. Bonus tip: don't forget to rotate. Most people never think about this one. If your pots sit in the same spot every day, one side of the plant hogs all the sunshine, while the other stays weak. Over time, the plant leans toward the light, growing lopsided. The fix? Every week or two, give the pot a gentle turn, 90 degrees or even half a turn. This way, every side gets equal sun. You'll notice your plants becoming fuller, stronger, and more balanced. I especially do this with flowering containers. It makes a massive difference. Instead of one side blooming like crazy while the back looks bare, the entire plant becomes lush and vibrant. Here's a fun challenge. Over the next 2 weeks, rotate your containers and snap before and after photos. I guarantee you'll be impressed by the results, and when you do, come back and share your experience in the comments. I'd love to hear how it worked for you. And that's a wrap. With these simple tweaks, your container plants will thrive instead of struggle. Gardening doesn't need to feel complicated or overwhelming. Just a handful of smart habits can transform your results. If this video was helpful, go ahead and hit that like button. It really supports the channel and helps other gardeners discover these tips. And if you want more practical advice that actually works, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Thanks for spending time with me today, and as always, happy gardening. See you in the next video.